One of the other big getting started components we need to discuss is knots. When we apply knots and hitches, we're basically applying components to rope that give us fixed points or points within the rope system where we can connect other components or connect the rope itself to another component. One of the key things that we need to understand about knots is that as we bend a rope in any application, as it bends closer and closer and closer together, when we compress that, each component of that is weakening the overall strength of the rope. So anytime we have a bend, a knot, a hitch in the rope that gets loaded, we've reduced the overall strength of the rope. We want to try and make sure when we apply knots and hitches to our rope systems that we do two things. It's called dressing them and setting them. So when we apply our knots, before we set them, which is pulling tension on each independent leg and making sure that the openings are all where we want them, and that it's set. It's not going to be loose or misshaped once it gets loaded. We're actually trying to manually load it by hand. We set it. Before we do that, we want to dress it, which means that we look at each lay of the rope as it configures through that hitch or that knot, and then we're ensuring that it's all where we want it to be, and there's no crossovers that are going to cause that knot or that hitch to not perform the way they're designed. Once we've analyzed all that and we've dressed it out, which means we've moved all those little segments around, then we can set it. Once the knot is dressed and set, then we can apply safeties as appropriate, which are typically overhand safeties, and then implement the knot the way it's designed. So we're going to get into all of our knot segments here. We're going to talk about the applications for them, as well as some variable ways to tie them. For our application, there are a million ways to tie knots, but for ease and purposes of instruction, we're going to use one common application or twist method that you use with your hands that can result in tying virtually almost every knot that we're going to utilize within rope rescue applications. When we do this, we start by placing the rope over our palm with our thumb outboard. We're then going to use a control hand, and we're going to twist our hand like we're turning the keys in our ignition in our car. So we always start by pinching the rope, by placing our hand out naturally, rotating or articulating our knuckles towards us, thumb pointed away from us, pointer finger pointing back at us. We're going to come down and we're just going to grasp the rope with those two fingers. Once you grab the rope, we're going to turn the keys in the ignition and let the rope naturally roll over itself. That fundamental movement is the starting point of every knot that we're going to go through, as well as secondary and additional points within those knot tying and hitch type applications. So practice that movement and get proficient at just making that quick flip by turning the rope between your two fingers like you're turning the keys in your ignition.